I'm Bobby Halton. I work for fire engineering, and I am really grateful to be able to tell you that this is the very first, the inaugural podcast for Mayday Monday. Now, you're really familiar with Mayday Monday from our website. That's Tony Carroll's piece that he gives us every Monday, where Tony kind of breaks down what happened at a fatal fire and kind of gives us some insight as to training opportunities, tools, insights from folks that were actually there. And he does an amazing job, and they're always just off the charts. And Tony was doing it for his department in DC, and he came to us and said, "Hey, would you guys like to use these?" And we were like, "Duh!" And so that started a fantastic relationship. Tony's going to be teaching at FDIC this year. So Tony picked a really heavy event for his first podcast, and my hat's off to you for that, because it's a firefighter who is extremely well loved and well known, and luckily we're able to have someone who's intimate with the entire event, and that's Chief Pete Van Dorpe. And so I couldn't imagine a better way to introduce the very first Mayday Monday podcast. Your host is going to be Tony Carroll. Tony's the man below me who's follically impaired. The other handsome, just teasing Tony. You can laugh at that. And the other gentleman is Pete Van Dorpe. And Pete is a retired battalion chief from the city of Chicago. He was the chief of training. He has been involved with the UL stuff, gosh, since we began it, because it was originally NIST. And I remember Pete and I met when we were burning down. It wasn't Cabrini Green, but it was like Cabrini. What was the name of that place, Pete?
Robert Taylor Homes.
Yeah, we were burning that down. That's 20 years ago. Remember? That's
it wasn't that long.
Close. It's got to be.
It's getting there. Come on, don't make it worse than it is, Bobby.
Well, it's more than 15 because I wasn't with fire engineering yet.
Oh, okay. So yeah, might be coming on 20. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's 15 plus anyway. So so he's been involved with all of that. He's currently on the board of UL. He writes extensively for fire engineering. He speaks at every FDIC. He's been a keynoter and just an absolutely wonderful human being. Tony, on the other hand, is Tony. So I'm just kidding. Tony is the former chief of training in DC. Now, currently, you're a battalion chief, right, Tony? Or
yes, sir. Yeah, operations battalion. Operations battalion.
So Tony's still knee deep in all of this. So when Tony puts something up there, he's got skin in the game. He's not fooling around, and he's really one of the most insightful firefighters I've ever known. I kid him because he's easy to get, which is just great. After all these years, he's still easy to get. But he's one of the most insightful firefighters. He's one of the most educated firefighters, and he's clearly one of the most dedicated firefighters that I know of in the field today. So it's really a tremendous pleasure to introduce the host of Mayday Monday podcast. And Tony's going to try to get us one a month. If things happen, we may miss a month or whatever, but Tony's committed to getting us at least one a month. And so without further ado, Tony, why don't you take over and tell us how did Mayday Monday get started? Where are you going to go with this? And then we'll get into the LODD that you've decided to work with for this first podcast.
Yeah, that's great. Great. I really appreciate you coming on, Chief, and saying these kind words about me, about the mission that I'm on to really remember firefighters who we've lost in the line of duty, make sure that their memory isn't lost. We always say we'll never forget. Hopefully this is one way so that we won't forget. With that, I do want to take not a shot at you, but I remember coming to a class back is FDIC. It was you and Ted Nee. You guys did a simulation thing, right? And you talked about, I think you were in the training academy, but that was after you had a heart attack. So you said you were a full duty coward because you were at the training academy. And I was taken aback by that. And I'm like, one day I'm going to bring this up. So fortunately, we're all here. So
I lived long enough to get him back.
I stole that line off my uncle, who was FDNY. And he says, "Yeah, not like them full duty cowards over there in the inspections division." It's just it's just a jab at the guys who aren't on the
Right.
line.
Just a jab, right? And there's nothing behind it. Just like they say, those who do, and those who can't teach. Well, I mean, we know that.
Yeah, you said that, not me.
I know. Actually, Walter Webb told me that one time. Again, FDIC. So, anyways, thank you so much. I really want to also first say that thank you to Clarion, the fire engineering guys, Tammy for inspiring this, for Peter for helping get this thing going, and you, Chief Halton, for allowing me to do this, to take up some time here. Yes, Mayday Mondays. What is it? It was born out of as being a company officer and making sure my guys were trained in being prepared. Right. In DC, we work a day on, 24 on, 72 off. So that allows us to work 7 or 8 days a month. So then with that, we would work one Monday, one Tuesday, one Wednesday. So what I did was every Monday, we made it about Mayday, whether it was a firefighter survival, whether it was a firefighter rescue. But it was kind of going along with, in the department, we were doing flashover Fridays then too, where we would send companies down to the training school and go through the flashover container and learn about that. So it dovetailed along with flashover Fridays, Mayday Monday. Then it was really about my company, 6 or 7 guys that I would dive deep in. As I progressed through the fire department, I got promoted and went to the safety office. The safety office, you don't really have a company, right? You're citywide, and there's no members assigned to you. But so the suggestion was, why don't I take that citywide? So with that, it kind of was born into a social media campaign, because again, we're thinking, what's one way to get to these younger members? They're always on their phones. Maybe they'll like the Twitter and Facebook page of DC Fire and EMS. They'll go on and they'll find it. Then we also then decided to send out an internal email to everybody. And then that went from once a month, right? One Monday a month to every Monday. So it went from 12 Mayday Mondays a year to 52 Mayday Mondays a year. That went on for a couple of years, and then it got to be a lot. So suggestion was, and again, not everybody works 4 Mondays a month. So you'll work one Monday, or choose one Monday that you work and do the Mayday Monday thing. So it went down to once a month. Chief, Halton, I saw you at the Congressional Fire Service Institute dinner and pitched the idea to you, and you said, absolutely, send it over. So that was a couple of years ago. This actually starts our 7th year of Mayday Mondays, to bring this information to you. Today, we're going to do just like every Mayday Monday. We're going to honor someone who gave their life. We're going to remember them. We're going to learn about them. We're going to learn about the incident that took their life. And then hopefully I'll offer you a skill or a drill that you can learn from the incident. Perhaps it was a contributing factor. Perhaps it was something that just, we can emphasize that will hopefully make us better prepared as firefighters as we go through this. Fortunately, we know that our line of duty death numbers are down. Is that because of Mayday Mondays? It's not because of Mayday Mondays, but I think it is a lot to do with a heightened awareness into what's killing us on the fire ground. And what we can do to avoid these things. So I want to help try and do a part with that and keep this going. With that in mind, the podcast that we're going to do, I'm going to try and find someone to interview, because you don't want to look at me the whole time in my follically challenged head here. You don't want to look at me the whole time. And I think that we have some great people out there who can provide us insight. As Bobby said, we have Pete Van Dorpe, retired from the Chicago Fire Department, and a friend of mine also with the International Society of Fire Service Instructors. He's the president that's serving this term as the president of the society. We're a lot of things going on there. We hope that if you're an instructor, you should be a member, and you can get some inspiration, get some mentoring. You can find people to talk to about issues, but Pete does that too. And Pete agreed to come on and kind of talk about this. Again, another thing that ties us all together is the UL stuff. I've been involved with UL for a couple of years on a couple of their studies, and Bobby and Pete are both involved on their board to kind of direct and send them, where they're going to go, the direction that they're headed. So this is a home run as the first edition. Did you hear this is the inaugural edition of the Mayday Monday podcast? So again, I recruited them. We got Chief Halton agreed to come in and kind of hang out with us a little bit. He's got another thing to get to, so he may leave a little early if we get going here for a while. But today we want to talk about that. Pete, Chicago, huh? Chicago, that's a pretty cool place.
It is. It's a wonderful place. And I'm not just boasting as it's my hometown, but Chicago is probably one of the prettiest big cities you could ever go visit anywhere in the world. It truly is. And it's a very accessible city. It's easy to get around. It's a wonderful place. And I'm happy to call it home. I truly am.
You haven't sailed off into the sunset in Florida or anything?
Not technically. So in 2013, I retired from the Chicago Fire Department, and failing at retirement, the next day I started out in the Algonquin Lake in the Hills Fire Protection District, and I spent about 5 years out there being assistant chief and then chief. And in 2019, I retired from there. So now I'm failing at retirement for the second time. Still happy to work with UL on their advisory board and spreading that message, and more than happy to stay involved with the International Society of Fire Service Instructors. We've got a lot of exciting things going on, which is not what today is about, but Tony knows and Bobby knows. It is our 60th anniversary coming up in 2021. If you haven't checked out the website lately for both UL and ISFSI, I encourage you to do that. Lot going on.
I think the society's got a great history, and again, maybe we could have a show on that, or we do, right? We kind of have a training podcast on the first Wednesday of the month, featuring. I'm on that as a ISFSI guy, and then we have the Traditions Training guys on there as well to talk about everything training. So we also, if you're a member, we have happy hours and things like that where you can come and network with everybody there. But so Algonquin Hills or Algonquin?
It took me 3 years to be able to say it. So it's a fire protection district, covers two towns and then some. And the two principal towns it covers are Algonquin and Lake in the Hills. So I actually live in Lake in the Hills.
Land area too, right?
It's 40 miles outside of downtown Chicago. So it's right, not an immediate suburb, but it's right there. We're not country. We're right next to country, but we're not country.
Yeah, I went to Schaumburg and met with Colomé.
Yeah.
So I kind of got to see some of that outside the city stuff. Again, kind of a lot like we have here in Virginia, Northern Virginia, outside of DC as a suburb. So good. Okay, now we have that basis there. Where Chicago? Where did you stay in one neighborhood? You spend a lot of time there.
I spent a lot of time on the north side. I spent a lot of time on the west side. That's kind of where I got my street cred. The west side is still a busy place. I spent all of my time as a lieutenant on the west side. Got back out there as a captain. Got back out there again as a battalion chief. So, every time you get promoted, they bump you off somewhere else. But I spent most of my time north and west as a battalion chief. When you're battalion chief, they throw you in a citywide relief pool. So that's when you really get to see what's going on outside your backyard. Spent a fair amount of time as a battalion chief in a downtown district and a high-rise district. And that kind of led to the whole NIST UL association, at least the beginnings of it. And then wound up my last 3 years as the chief of training for the Chicago Fire Department. So I've been involved in training off and on since I was a lieutenant, taught for the Illinois Fire Service Institute. And then eventually they couldn't find anybody else to put their hand. I took one step back, everybody else took two. So I became the director of training for.
So how many guys are on the job there?
It's just shy of 5,000 when they're at full strength.
Wow. Yeah. Wow, that's a lot to train. I mean, you guys have, and I went to the academy. I can't believe that academy services 5,000 people.
It was state of the art when it was built, which was 1961. I think it was opened up. It was designed for 50 recruits, and now a typical class is about 125. So
an interesting historical footnote is that UL Laboratories actually started above a Chicago Fire Department station.
It was part of the Columbian Exhibition.
Exactly right. So
I mean, it was started because of the fire risk that newfangled electricity was going to propose, and the insurance underwriters didn't want to underwrite the fair, so it was in danger of not opening. So this guy out of the East Coast, I think it was out of Boston, to be honest with you, he came out and set up this company and sort of calmed everybody down and said, okay, here's what the hazards are, here's how you mitigate them, and that was the beginning of UL.
and that's a great piece of American history, because that was Tesla and Westinghouse, and that's how Westinghouse won the contract to do the Niagara electrical plant, Niagara Falls, and the rest is history. That's the AC/DC current wars ended right then and there.
Absolutely, yeah. That's
Wow.
why we have AC current.
So now we're really getting off of off tangent here, but that's why we have Bobby here, is to do that, to add that insight. So Chicago, again, you guys, I noticed in the thing they have like a still alarm, and then you have a 211, 311. How does that work with a still alarm?
So there's controversy over the term, and I won't even go. It's not even worth going there. But the initial alarm, somebody calls 911. Boom! I smell smoke. I got a fire in a building. Hangs up the phone. What do you get? You get 2 engines. You get 2 trucks. You get a battalion chief. In short, that's a still alarm. There's variations, but that's a still alarm. You get on the scene. You decide you say you got smoke showing. You get a working fire response. They'll give you a squad. They'll give you a RIT team. They'll give you an ambulance. An ambulance supervisor. All right, you got more than you can handle with the first alarm assignment. You say, give me a box. Technically a still in box. Now you have a still in box alarm. So a still in box alarm is technically your second alarm assignment. And then the 211 comes after that, then 311, etc.
Wow. So there's still a still alarm, 2 engines, 2 trucks. Yep. And you guys staff with five firefighters?
4 or 5. It's officially 5, but they run they're called variances. About 45% of companies on any given day will have 4.
Is that like because a guy called in sick?
No, it's actually, it's a contractual negotiation over the years. It's just a reduction in manpower. So they schedule that every day. That so many companies are on our 4-man companies. That's
interesting. So you get at the you could get 20 firefighters on an initial alarm with the chief,
right? And
then you call a working fire. Then you get a squad and a RIT company.
You get a squad, you get a RIT truck, and you get a RIT ambulance.
And you get another chief, or you still got just one?
Yeah,
chief?
You get another chief. You get a second chief on the working fire response.
When I was out there with Colomay, he talked about a plans chief. Was that on the?
So that would be on the still in box, right? So then still in box, you also get a communications van and a command van, and they'll assign a chief to take charge of that. So that becomes your planning guy.
And then you have like 3 chiefs.
Yep. You'll have so you're going to have the still chief. You're going to have the RIT chief. You're going to have the box chief. You're going to have a plans chief.
Oh, so 4 chiefs. Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys front load that up. That's good though. I mean,
it is, and I tell you, those were hard learned lessons. They do the same thing on high rises. We had a couple of shaky incidents in the 90s, and we front load our high rise response kind of in the same way. And that's the idea. Get them going now. We all got radios. You can tell them to go home. Nobody minds.
Right. Hard learned lessons. Yeah, that's the story of Mayday Mondays. Unfortunately, is that. So let's move into the firefighter who passed away in this one, Herbert Johnson. He's a captain. He was a captain serving in an engine company there, right?
Yep.
Did you know Herbie? I guess it sounds like everybody knew Herbie.
That's the thing. Herbie was one of those guys, right? And I would call Herbie a friend. And not that we grew up together. We didn't go to different high schools together or anything like that. But we crossed paths a whole lot during our careers. Herbie was a fireman's fireman, an officer's officer. He was the guy. We all know the guy, right? If you're crawling down the hallway, Herbie was the guy you wanted to crawl down with. If you're on the roof, you wanted to be on the roof with Herbie. If you were in a dicey bar somewhere out of town and things weren't going the right way, you wanted to be standing next to Herbie. And if you were at a party somewhere, if you were having a good time, if you wanted to have a good time, if you wanted to organize a golf outing, Herbie was the guy you would put in charge of it, because that man knew how to have a good time. Give you some context. All his brothers and sisters were firefighters or police officers. His son was in the Marine Corps at the time of his death, deployed in the Corps. So he comes from a family of public servants, and they were serious about what they did. You know, they weren't somber about what they did. They weren't that, you know, Herbie was just a fun guy, and he was a smart, intelligent, thinking fire officer. He was one of the invincibles. And
So
yeah.
I was reading up on Herbie because I love to again we all, you know, I have a T-shirt. I got a Herbie T-shirt, and I wanted to show that I got a Herbie T-shirt.
That's good.
And
Thank
one
you.
of the things I've noticed about this is on the back of the shirt. I don't know if you can see it. There's a set of glasses back there. Could you see it?
Yeah.
So I can picture that, right? The guy's got to have reading glasses or something, and he doesn't want to carry them in his pocket, so he puts them on the back. I mean,
Yeah.
we all know that guy, right? So as I'm reading about this, it said some of the things I saw was larger than life, fun loving, infectious smile, which I'll show a picture in a second of an infectious smile. Knew everyone in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
After he passed away, and they named a post office, right? One of the local post office,
Right.
they named it in his honor. And reading the newspaper article about that, there was an alderman there who said he could count on Herbie telling him like it is. In fact, he says that he was eager to express his opinion. My wife likes to say that you would provide growth promoting feedback, but that's Herbie, right? Herbie was the guy who
a polite way of saying
it. Yeah, I love my wife's quote, but that's he was eager to express his opinion, and you could count on his opinion. One of the other things that I noticed in looking at everything was he was a family man.
Oh yeah.
And the fire department was a big part of that family.
Absolutely. You know, we throw that word around a lot about our second family, but Herbie and his brothers and people like Herbie, they lived that. I mean, they lived that. They truly did involve the fire service in their lives. They lived the fire service. They didn't just show up to work. This is who and what they were to the very core of their being. And Herbie was one of those people. It was a terrible, terrible loss. Terrible.
Yeah. And it sounds like also that he worked a lot at the training school.
Yeah, he would. So the way Chicago typically works, we have a very bare bones permanent staff, and you pull guys in from the field. Anytime you got a recruit class or you got an officer class, you pull in your, and even when we're doing, you know, like we want to do, you know, some focus truck training or something like that. Again, we'd pull guys in from the field. So Herbie was in and out of the training academy a lot because he was one of those guys that you just could count on. I mean, he brought the street cred, he brought the intelligence. He brought the ability to engage with the student, whether they were veteran firefighters or recruits. He was a no mess around kind of guy. You could always count on him.
In addition, he was eager to express his opinion.
Yes.
So I got ahead of myself. I need to share my screen here and show you the this month's Mayday Monday post. That again, the Mayday Monday, right? I send out basically a PowerPoint slide. And here is what it looks like. This month's PowerPoint slide will look like this. It's supposed to be an attention getting graphic that will hopefully grab you, and you'll want to know more about what this describes. It's accompanied with this is a Word document that kind of outlines exactly what's going on here. Again, you can see here. This month we're talking about fire behavior and specifically the impact of ventilation. We'll get to that in a minute. But first, let's talk about Herbie. He was a captain. He passed away 11/2/2012. Again, Mayday Mondays. It's a monthly thing, the first Monday of the month, and each month we try to remember a firefighter or firefighters who lost their life during that month. Again, so Herbie is for the November. Last month in October, we remembered a firefighter who passed away in October of previous years, but you can see that. So this is this month's. With that, let's see. Here's some things of Herbie. Again, you can see that we all I think we all can see that firefighter, and when it talk about an infectious smile, that's an infectious smile right there. I think like you said, if that guy was coming up to you and he asked you to do something, you definitely would, just because it's probably going to be a good time, right? It's probably going to be a good time.
Unless it came up to him when he had the look on the left. That's was his "it sucks to be you" look. You know? And that was one of his favorite phrases. Yeah, it sucks to be you. Get in there, you know, or it sucks to be you. Pick up the, you know, he would not tolerate complaining in any way, shape, or form. And that was his response. It sucks to be you. Let's go. Come on, work to do.
Yeah, and yeah, so I could see where, like you said, it's a big loss for the Chicago Fire Department. That picture in the bottom there is that post office dedication, and it was interesting to see that his son went to be a police officer in Chicago.
Yeah.
So if we want to get into the fire, let's talk a little bit about the incident. Again, if you want to know more about this incident, there's a NIOSH report available. In fact, here is the NIOSH report that you could go find. Oops, sorry. It's right there. Oops, maybe I'm not doing it right. Let me share my screen. Here is the NIOSH report that you can find. Again, CDC, it's a CDC group, right? They're part of the Centers for Disease Control and National Institutes of Occupational Safety and Health. They investigate a lot of these firefighter fatalities, and they did a report on this fire here. In addition to that, we also have this incident, which was recreated by the NIST guys. Sorry about that. I should have been ready. It was recreated by the NIST when they were still doing their fire investigations, and they did a study on the simulation of an attic fire in a wood frame residential structure. So there's lots of resources available on this fire that you can investigate. But back to,
if I could dovetail onto that just a little, Tony, because they don't always occur together like that. But particularly when both NIST and NIOSH did an investigation, those are particularly good incidents to study, because NIOSH does the behavioral investigation, NIST does the fire dynamics. And when you have both of those for the same incident, that really multiplies the learning that can take place because of that. So always look for both and focus on those. Yeah,
absolutely. That's where you know, I'm intimate with the Cherry Road incident that happened back in 1999, and I know from you know, working with Dan Madrikowski, that was like a first time for that fire dynamic simulator, and it really helps to drive the point home and talk about what happened in these incidents, and it just, like you say, it enhances that learning a lot. So back to this fire. This pretty typical place for that area of Chicago.
This is about as between this and a Chicago bungalow. We would just call this a 2.5-story balloon frame, and this is about as bread and butter a fire in the city of Chicago as you can get. You know, we have thousands of buildings like this even today. You know, they were built in the 20s through the 40s. And you'll have block upon block upon block of these identical buildings, just one after another. They're balloon frame wood, and they have wooden back porches on the entire back side. So going up all the way to the attic level, as a matter of fact. And it's relevant to this fire. A lot of those wooden porches get enclosed over time. So we call them enclosed back porches. And that changes the dynamics of the fire ground a little bit, as we'll get into. You can see it in the back there. Yeah, in the picture on the right.
So you're saying that normally when that's completed, that's an open porch?
Yeah, when that was originally built, it was just open wood stairs, almost like a timber frame. It's kind of a large timber, you know, large frame, you know, the 6x6 posts and that kind of thing, 8x8 posts sometimes. And then over the years, just to keep the weather off them and or to add a little bit more useful square footage into the house, they'd get wrapped and enclosed.
And these are balloon frame?
Oh yeah, these are all balloon frame buildings.
Yeah, so
and the reason they were so popular back then, if you look at the frontage, that's where your taxable frontage is. Yeah. So it's narrow. But but these things can, you know, besides just the porches being enclosed, you know, from having hung out there forever, and they're very similar to buildings in New York, they can go back and back and back. We used to laugh. They used to call them Irish mansions. Every time you have another kid, Dad would put another room in the back of the house.
Yeah.
Because that wasn't taxable. And oftentimes these are not permitted work either. So, you know, you got to.
Oh yeah, this is all pre-code stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, this is your cousin knows how to swing a hammer. Somebody's got some lumber. So you enclose the back porch, and then over time that back porch becomes used for all kinds of different activities.
Oh yeah.
So the crews they sent a still alarm to the neighborhood for smoke in the area.
Right.
That got the closest companies.
Yep. That would be. So.
And then when they got there, they had a working fire. But the first guy there was the chief.
Yeah, the battalion chief got on the scene first. He identified that he had a working fire. So they knew what they had. They also knew they cleared the building. It was an occupied building, but they had also cleared the building before they started the fire attack. So they knew that that the building was unoccupied at the time. And like I said, this is a routine fire. This is not at all unusual.
So when he got there, the chief identified a working fire. What was on the back porch, right?
Yeah.
The
So
closed back porch.
I don't know what the first. I'd be honest with you, I don't recall what the first radio report was, but the fire was clearly in the attic. So that half story is usually an occupiable space. You can see from the size of it, it would be partly either as utility space or sometimes even as living space. Those attics would be framed out. So the fire was identified as being on that third floor in that attic space. Yeah.
So the first engine was it 123, engine 123?
Yep, 123 is first in engine. That's Herbie. Herbie had it.
And they got there and made entry to the front door like typical.
Sure. Go upstairs. I mean, it was pretty clear where the fire was. It was all showing itself on the attic space up there. So they stretch a line to the second floor. Because see, the way this works, and Milwaukee has buildings a lot like this too. So that attic space, there's no interior entrance into that attic space. The only way to get to that attic space is off those rear porches on those exterior stairs, right? So you have two choices. You can go straight to the back and go up those stairs in the back to get to the attic, or you can go to the front door. And typically, because that gets you inside and helps you clear those spaces and protect those spaces. You get up to the second floor, take the door from the second floor into that porch area, and then get up into the attic.
So you didn't even have like an attic scuttle?
No, there's no scuttle or anything like that. Occasionally you might find one where somebody remodeled it into there, a drop set of stairs, or sometimes even in the nicer neighborhoods, the neighborhoods that flipped, someone would do an open staircase from the second to the third floor, kind of an open floor plan thing. But typically you'd have to get onto that porch to get up into the attic. Yeah.
And it's like a walk-up stairway. I mean, it's a man.
Oh yeah, it'd be a regular set of stairs. On occasion, and you got to be careful with this because, as Bobby pointed out, these things were built over time and they were not permitted and all that stuff. There are a few of them where it's actually a ladder from the second floor into the attic, but those are pretty rare because, like I said, people wanted to use these attics for living space. So there's typically a full staircase right to the attic.
Yeah, now I'm sure, right? With a lot of the renovations, that could be 4 different units now, right?
These would typically be at least 2, and then sometimes 3. You'd occupy the basement. That'd be the next move, and it'd be rare to make the attic a separate apartment, but it does happen.
Yeah,
particularly immigrant neighborhoods. Any neighborhood that experienced any time in its life a lot of immigration, you find these things cut up into as many units as you can make into them.
Yeah, I'm sure, especially with everybody kind of staying in with the COVID thing too. You never know right now, right? There could be people all over that thing all time of the day.
Sure.
So good. They got there. The place was cleared. They had an active fire. So I was interested in the hose deployment. They have a 1 3/4 attached to a gated Y.
Yeah.
Does every company carry that?
So that's standard, and they're over time. I don't want to get into it's a minor thing. Over time, there's controversy as about whether we should have the Y on there or not. But one of the standard hose beds on the back of every engine in the CFD is, it's a bed of 700 feet of 2.5-inch hose, and then there'll be a shutoff pipe at the end of that, and then at the tip of that shutoff pipe is threaded, so you can connect your 1 3/4 hose right to that shutoff pipe. Now, what they've officially done is add a Y first, right? So now when I stretch that first line, if I need a second line, it can be taken off that Y. And the primary reason that was done is because you get courtyard buildings or other places where you have this really long stretch into the staircase. It wouldn't be this building so much, but those deeper buildings, or the courtyard type of buildings that are far off the street. And that makes it a lot easier to get that second line deployed. That was the argument for it. There's
No,
some,
I absolutely like that static bed of a 2.5.
Oh, yeah.
Have that. We typically have a 200-foot attack, a 200
Sure.
foot 2.5 attack line on each of our rigs. But a lot of companies just use that, to like extend the line so they don't have to have a long small line. They can have a 200-foot supply line, if you will, to that smaller line.
Right.
But that's good. And that's a typical setup in Chicago.
Absolutely. Right.
All right. So then 123 went to the front. Then I guess it sounds like everybody got there about the same time.
It's pretty close. It's a densely packed area. The coverage there, because it's a densely packed area and it's a high volume in terms of runs. So there's a lot of companies there. They're close together. Right.
If you have this graphic here that shows that, again, you can see, you guys call it sectors, right? Not sides or.
No, they're transitioning now, but at the time we were still using sectors. Yeah.
So the front of the building is sector 1, and you can
Right.
see 123 and tower ladder 39. Or those guys are housed together.
Yes, sir.
So they got there, and the line is stretching here. This company here is at 49.
Yep.
And they stretch a line to the alley, and that's a typical second due.
That's not uncommon at all. So the second due company would typically do one of two things: either back down on that first truck, and then they could hit a hydrant in the opposite direction, or they would take the alley. A lot depends on what the first in companies report. And part of the reason for taking that alley is because of these wooden back porches and the proximity of the buildings. It's real easy for these things to get ahead of you, right? So, if you don't, if you misjudge it, or even if you judged it right, but conditions change, all of a sudden you've got a forest fire on the back of these buildings. And so getting the line back there, and you could see they deployed a large line, and that's what they were preparing for, is to be able to knock down those porches if this thing got out of hand.
Yeah, I mean, they call you guys the Windy City, so I can imagine that it's not uncommon to have 3 or 4 back porches off on a good fire.
Yep, it can happen.
Yeah. So at this point, I guess they said that one of the guys from the truck came around back and identified that the fire was in the stairwell.
So yeah, part of the first due truck's assignment is to get somebody to the rear, if at all possible, right? So you got 2 guys in charge of ventilation, typically going to the roof. You'll have a guy hook up with the officer, perhaps, and you'll send one, depending on how you want to deploy them, but you want to get somebody on the seaside as fast as possible, right? So even if it's just to run back there and take a quick peek at things, identify any hazards or situations, because you can see, or you can get an indication from the way these things are laid out. A lot of these buildings have, gates in between the buildings, both front and back, right? So the idea of the officer running around and doing a 360 can be problematic. So that's, again, part of the reason for getting somebody to that rear right away.
Absolutely. That's what, again, I hate to go back to mine, but our first due engine goes to the front, our second due engine goes to the rear. So we get those eyes, right? Get the eyes on the rear, because we know how different the front can be from the rear in these places. So no, that's good. That's good. And so, again, from the reading the investigation, it sounds like the truck guy came around to the back, opened the door to the stairwell, and then identified that there was no fire, I think, in the basement, but the fire was on the first floor of that attached stairwell, and then he went back around to the front. So then 123, this is from the NIST recreation of the fire, and what we're seeing here is, if you see my cursor and the words here, before failure, this would be the alpha side, or the front of the building, and there's a stairwell that would take them up to this second floor. Was there an interior stairwell to go to the second floor?
Yeah, sure.
So there's a stairwell here to go up here, and the engine was advancing their line down this hallway to get to this where the fire was.
Yep.
And what happened was while they're advancing down this hallway, the door from the stairwell, the enclosed stairwell on the back porch, failed. And when that door opened, the fire went from a ventilation limited fire to a fully developed fire, causing those hot gases to come down the hallway. And the men of 123 were coming down this hallway.
Yeah. So Tony, I'll pause you here, because which doorway are you referring to failing? The second floor door?
This here, right back here.
Yeah. So my understanding, if I recall this correctly, was it was the event that caused that door to fail. It was not the failure of that door that caused the event. So, and not being there, right? These are the kind of things that you can only surmise. But the NIST investigation, that was what they surmised, is that the vent blew that door open, basically.
I got you. So when this door here was opened, that changed this fire to fully developed, which then failed this door
right
as they were coming down.
Yep, that's the sequence of events. Yeah.
And temperatures went from 70 degrees to over 500
at the ceiling level. Yeah.
So again, because conditions were pretty clear, they were walking down the hallway. We surmise.
We surmise.
And then the captain recognized that there was a problem, right? Captain Johnson recognized there was a problem, yelled to the members to get out.
Yep.
And then he took that heat and fell to the ground.
Correct.
The members were able to get him out.
Yep.
And perform life-saving measures to get him to the hospital.
Correct.
So
he was alive when he got to the hospital.
Ooh, my bad. Let me go back.
So go back one slide real quick. There you go, Tony, for a second. So just to recap, the event is what causes the door on the second floor to fail. So
correct.
What's really important about the modeling that NIST does for us here is the amount of energy. So the other thing to do too is, as you're looking at this photograph here, is to orient yourself as to, so Tony, with your cursor, show everybody where the street side is, A side, right? So this is the back of the building, because I don't want people to get confused, because, people are looking at it like they would read, left to right. So this is the front of the building. So the team had come in and come up, and they're heading towards the fire in the back, right? And then as they're going, so much energy. And remember, where it gets sticky for us, and as we talk about cool air gravity currents and flow paths and all of that, is that when you've got a building like this, especially a balloon frame construction building, an older home, these things are leaky to begin with. And when you open the door, you can have closed doors ahead of you, but air can be being entrained in places that you cannot see. And what's nice about what they're doing with the modeling now is they're kind of overlaying some of that cool air gravity current and thermodynamics so that you can actually see, when Dan animates these things, I think that's the correct word, you can see that the fuel and the energy, and fuel being oxygen sometimes. So imagine, as the crews have opened this door up in order to advance the line to get to what looks like a pretty routine fire, there was so much energy here that it causes the door to fail, that's a lot. I mean, that's a lot of freaking energy.
Oh yeah.
Right. And thank you. You just segued into some other things that are included in this Mayday Monday. Included in the Mayday Monday is, you'll find, so there's some links to help hopefully explain some of these terms that we're talking about. When we talk about the flow path, I've included in the Mayday Monday a link to UL Firefighter Safety Research Institute talking about flow path. I think it's even Steve Kerber has a video where he talks about what a flow path is and how pressure changes and things like that. We talk about ventilation limited. You're going to read that into the NIOSH report about ventilation limited. And what exactly does that mean? Again, there's a great video that I've included in a link to get you to a UL video about ventilation limited. And then heat release.
And the thing to remember too, as Tony's talking, when he's talking about these concepts, remember that when we're talking about gravity currents and we're talking about flow paths, the cooler flow paths or the low cool air gravity currents that are coming through there, they're denser, right? And so when this energy got released, remember, energy has to expand. That the heat expands that fuel, the oxygen and the gases expand, and that's why it's so powerful. And folks, you need to keep that in the back of your head, that cool air is denser. That's why it's low. It's denser. It's got more. It's carrying more fuel and air to the air being part of that fuel mix to the energy that's trying to suck it forward. And then as it expands it, anything that's trying to contain that compartment, whether it's a void space over your head or a closet or a room, is going to feel that, it's going to force its way out of there. It's going to try to explode out of there, which is how I see this event unfolding explosively.
So one more term that we talk about is heat release rate. And again, we all know about temperature, but the heat release rate is really brings home this idea of the modern fire behavior and the fire dynamics. And there's also a video linked to the thing where Robin Zavotek, used to be with UL, explains that in really good terms so that we can all understand. So again, that's included in the Mayday Monday. When you read the document, you can find these links to help you understand exactly what's going on. So other things that we can do. One thing there is Herbie Johnson again was killed in this incident, and we want to make sure that we understand that one of our members made the ultimate sacrifice there in doing his job. Right, he was trying to advance a line to get into a position. This event happened, and he was unable to survive the injuries he received at that fire. The Herbie Johnson, there's a foundation that honors keeps his memory alive, and like Chief Van Dorpe was talking about, they hold annual golf tournaments. I'm sure with the coronavirus stuff, it probably got canceled this year. But if you're on Facebook, get on there and look for the Herbie Johnson Foundation. Another way for us to really get intimately involved and intimately understand fire behavior is with a dollhouse. These things are really great tools for us to understand, and so we can get up close and personal. I know Chief Van Dorpe, you've done some work with these. Bobby, have you played with the dollhouses?
Oh, a great deal. That's Sean and PJ there in your photo, and yeah, played with them with Andy and Sean and Pete, and it's a great learning tool. It's a great learning tool.
Yeah, they're really handy. I mean, and I like that they're called dollhouses because it's it's like self-deprecating, it's a silly little model dollhouse, whatever. But when you do a class on fire behavior and fire dynamics, and then you let the guys come out here and play with this thing, and they can make the fire take off, and they can choke the fire, and they can see that even a venting fire is still vent limited. One of the salient points about Herbie's tragedy is that fire was venting out of that attic. That was not there was fire blowing out of that rear window, right? But those back porches, those enclosed back porches were still fuel rich. They were still too rich to burn, right? So when a little bit more ventilation gets added, and it was likely the rear door at the base of the stairs, that gave it the extra oxygen it needed to continue to grow. And in this case, it grew so fast that it went boom. And when it went boom, the door that was between Herbie and that fire failed, and it failed catastrophically, and it failed instantaneously. And he wasn't ready for that, So even a fire that's showing fire is still vent limited, and adding ventilation can trigger one of these events. And these dollhouses are great ways to demonstrate that example.
That's a great point. That's a great point, Pete. That the fire was vented and it was still vent limited.
Oh, absolutely. Here's an interesting point, and Mandrzikowski makes this better than I can. I'll do my best. But when you see fire blowing out a window and filling that entire window, everything behind it is not burning. Everything behind it is too rich to burn. So there's more unburned fuel in there, right? So if it gets more air, it's going to do some more burning. All fires are vent limited fires until you get water on them. That needs to be the assumption you make.
And you're right. And we have the keys to extinguishment kingdom, right? That's Dennis Legier's statement. But we have the keys. That hose that we carry. And this is another instance. I mean, it's a tough one that they were stretching a hose line. They were stretching a hose line. Again, we see these incidents that are happening where the fire dynamics, the changes are occurring so quick, and we just have to, be prepared for these things to happen. This model here, the dollhouse, you can see how good you can get up and close. You can get up close and personal with this, and really start to understand flow path. You can understand vent limited. You can understand, I think one of the best ones to understand is that smoke is fuel, right? Smoke is fuel. I know you guys were taught this. I know I was taught this, is that we didn't put smoke on we didn't put water on smoke. And that is, again, with all of the UL stuff, I think that's probably one theme that continues to go through every one of their experiments, is that smoke is fuel. Hot smoke is missing one thing. It's missing air, right? If we go back to the basics of the fire triangle, it's got the fuel, it's got the heat, it's missing oxygen. So
I just have to add, you got to give a lot of credit there to Andy Fredericks, because Andy in '95 was saying smoke is fuel, and you ought to be flowing water as you're going down the hallway. And he took a beating over that for years. Right. And he was right 25 years ago. You cool over your head all the time.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So that's this month's skill drill. This month's skill drill is to take these plans that let me show you here. Again, that's the stop knowing, start believing guys from PJ's from Connecticut, and
Sean is from Cobb County, Georgia.
Sean's from Georgia, and with that, they have been gracious enough to provide the plans on these dollhouses. If you go to the Stop Believing, Start Knowing Facebook page, you can link it. You can, down there on the bottom, you can see there's some emails and some links to be able to go, and they have great plans here for you to build the dollhouse. There's also included in there a lesson plan, so it's not, you don't have to play around too much with it. It does give you a lesson plan, so you can get a lot out of these things. Again, I know I've done a lot of these things, whether it's in fire behavior instruction in basic firefighter recruit class, or even for the companies. I'm going to do this. I'm going to build a couple of these next week. And the next Monday I work, we're gonna burn a couple of these for my battalion and get some use out of them. So
can I just ask two quick things before I go? I wanted to ask two things. One of Pete, and I know Pete has some good information on this. A lot of people think that there was a heavy fuel load in that staircase, but there was not, right, Pete?
No, nothing extraordinary. And so this is another one of the important lessons from the work that UL has done, is that given what things are made out of today, especially, there's always enough fuel. You don't have to overload your fuel, right? You don't have to have a hoarder house. It's not the amount of fuel that determines how big the fire gets. The amount of fuel determines how long the fire burns, but how much air the fire gets determines how much fire you have. That's just basic physics. And that's something we can't afford to ignore, right? This fire event was created by air, not by how much fuel it had. There's enough fuel laying around everywhere. I mean, an absolutely abandoned building, maybe not so much, but you know what I mean. Any building that has modern contents in it, modern fuel, petroleum-based contents in it, has more than enough fuel to trigger one of these events. You don't have to have any extraordinary situation whatsoever.
And that can be as simple as carpeting on the risers. It can be as simple as the fuel load was not extraordinary. No. It was the energy generated by the air and the heat. And
carpeting is just something else. It's amazing.
The other thing I just wanted to add real quickly, the Palmer Firebox is a great tool. Captain Palmer, who designed those, is a great guy. Matt has a great job here. He's got a couple of variations on that one too. So, feel free to reach out to those guys. I think they give you all their contacts. And the other thing to remember too is that the Max Firebox guys, and I'm not selling their stuff or anything. They make a great product. They give you great instructions. They have a great tool out there where you can, you don't need a gigantic training ground and a flashover chamber and everything else to do a little fire behavior training without putting people at high risk also. You know what I mean?
There's an alcohol-based setup, one of these setups as well. I know Boston's got one and they use it. I can't recall off the top of my head who makes it, but it's commercially available. So when you got to do it inside or any place you need to do clean burns, and you can do a lot of the same stuff with that. And it's plexiglass. So yeah, it's there's a lot out there, a lot of tools out there that we can use.
Yeah, and it really allows us to get up close and personal with it, right? I mean, like you said, Chief, we don't have to have a drill ground. We know the requirements with 1403 and how many instructors you have to have, and sometimes how counterproductive it can be to get in there. This, we can get up close and personal. You can build one, and it doesn't have to even be for 10 guys. 2 guys could play with this thing and get some good work out of the Palmer's Dollhouse. So I want to thank the Stop Believing, Start Knowing guys for letting us link to their prop plans. But that's also in this month's Mayday Monday offering, is the plans of that. Chief Van Dorpe, anything else you think we should add about some of the modern fire behavior? I know you've pretty intimate with some of the deliveries of these.
So I'll just give you a couple of my most quotable misquotes, I suppose. Is that anytime I'm presenting this to a group, first off, I use Herbie's stories as an introduction to everything I do, because I think it's and it was so impactful for me. I mean, during my time on the CFD, we buried 46 guys. In my last 3 years, I buried 5. And when I say I buried them, of course, I didn't do it personally, but part of my job as chief of training was to have a hand in organizing those funerals and training those funeral details. So those were much more impactful line of duty deaths because I had to be involved with the aftermath. And Herbie's was the last one. And that's me, or part of the real tragedy, is I never really lost a buddy in all that time and with all those deaths. But Herbie, I knew Herbie was a buddy. And it actually happened when we were what we call the prom we were graduating a group of candidates, and it wasn't their graduation, but it was the dinner party they have prior to their graduation. And it was on that night that Herbie passed, that the event occurred. So I try to say, if it can happen to Herbie, it can happen to any last one of us, right? And the lessons here are: 1, wear your stuff all the time. Herbie died because his upper airway swelled shut from thermal damage. So at some point he was out without respiratory protection. What point that was, I can't tell you, but at some point, I mean, it had to be that was the injury. And then the other thing is ventilation got ahead of suppression. And it doesn't mean somebody did anything wrong. It doesn't mean there was a mistake, but too much air and not enough water, and this is what you risk. And you can't predict when it will or will not explode on you. You can't predict when it's just going to get bigger, and when it's going to get bigger so fast that it goes boom. So don't let your ventilation get ahead of your suppression. To me, that's the biggest lesson here.
That's really, really succinct. I mean, we don't have to get really crazy about it, but ventilation ahead of suppression. And it is unfortunate that we have several incidents that we can see that impacted our members from those. So that's our Mayday Monday for November. Again, the goal here is to remember the member that was lost. We had some really good stuff here with Herbie Johnson, and Chicago, it sounds like there's a void of missing Herbie. Fortunately, we have great memories. We have a memory we need to honor as well. So as we honor that, let's train, let's practice, let's learn from it. And hopefully we can be prepared for for an incident that happens to us. I like to think that we're only as good as our next fire, right? When we go to these firehouses, I'm sure Chicago, Chief Halton in Albuquerque, same thing. You had pictures on the walls of fires that guys had been to, right? And we live on those. We say, oh, that was great. We're a good company because of it. But really, we need to have a picture of the next fire. What's that going to look like? And who knows? So that's why we have to be prepared for anything that can come to us. So what I'm asking maybe is that you take your Mondays and you make them about Maydays. It can be about personal survival. It can be about, entanglement, SCBA. SCBA is a real big one that I like to do. It can be about, I think what we're going to see come February, and we'll talk about heart health, right? That's a good thing about personal survival. And then it can also be about rapid intervention team or firefighter rescue or Denver drills, right? Things like that we've learned about. So it's about make Mondays about firefighter survival. That's my mission. I know I'm gonna try and bring in Halton, and we got Chief Van Dorpe here for this one, which just so happens it's the inaugural edition of the Mayday Monday podcast here. So real quick, Chief Halton, I know you got to go, but you need final words?
Well, I want to say thanks to Pete for being with you today, and thank you, Tony, for agreeing to do this. Pete's words can't be more important. Wear your gear. Sorry about the dogs. Somebody's at the door. Wear your gear all the time, whether you're above the fire, below the fire, near the fire. Wear your gear. Respect the lessons that we've learned. Understand that things need to be coordinated as well as we possibly can. Try not to get ahead of, as they say today, out over your skis, right? If ventilation's way ahead of suppression, call for water. When people have water, then, start thinking about opening it up, right? So all of those things are important, and we're not casting aspersions on anybody that was there that day. There, but for the grace of God goes any one of us. And we do this because Pete lost a friend and someone that he loved. We all lost a brother that day. Done was right. Meditation 17, the bell tolls for thee. Anytime we lose one of us, we lose a part of ourselves. And so, thank you, Pete, for sharing. We know it's difficult for you. We know that this was your friend, and I think we all feel closer to Herbie now from just being with you for the last hour. And so thank you for, being that vulnerable and being willing to do that. Thank you to PJ and Sean for sharing their plans, and Matt Palmer for sharing his plans. And of course, Tony, it's just immeasurable what you're doing and what you've been doing the last 7 years with these Mayday Mondays. And I know you don't hear it enough. I give you a hard time all the time, but folks are following you very closely. They're paying attention to what you're doing here, and they respect you greatly for it, as do I. So thank you for doing this.
Well, thanks, Chief. And it is a labor of love. I hope we don't have any more to do, right? Yeah. But we still want to honor those that we have lost, and make sure that guys are still remembering what sacrifice and what they gave to us. Thank you again, Chief Van Dorpe, for hanging out on this inaugural edition of the Mayday Monday podcast.
Thanks for thinking of me, and more importantly, thanks for thinking of Herbie. I'm so happy that you picked this one to start with.
Well, thank you. Now it sounds like we lost a good guy there, right? Good firefighter, good man, good family man. Yep. And he's a void has been created there, but hopefully we can bring somebody else up that can be as impactful as Herbie was. Sure. So thank you. That's Mayday Monday for this month. Again, look for us in Twitter. Look for us on Facebook. Fire Engineering will also send this stuff out. If you follow the DC Fire and EMS page, we'll do that. If you follow me on any of these things, I'm going to retweet these and resend them out on Facebook. So look for them there. If you have questions, you can email me mayday.monday@dc.gov, And we can, if you have topics, if you have a Mayday you want to talk about and come on to the podcast, that would be awesome. So thank you. And we'll see you next month.